Okay, are we ready for this? I think we're ready for this. Hey, greetings, one and all, and welcome once again to Tom's Hit Parade Live. Hope y'all are doing well, had a good week, and are ready for a good weekend. I am excited because I've got something really special. It's been on my mind in various planning stages, embryonic stages, for literally months, and also I'm excited to get this over with. Let me explain what I mean by that. Um, whenever I do these list videos, favorite albums list, rank lists, I of course like to show the CDs or records as I go through the lists. Hey Noah, how's it going? And so yeah, I guess it's mainly because I like to drive home the point, I guess you'd say, that I enjoy these albums enough that I bought them, picked them up, and enough that I wanted to physically own them, is what I'm trying to say. Um, and as I said, I've had these two videos this week and next week's video are a matching pair, I guess you'd say. Had these videos in mind for months and months. I actually did film, full confession, I actually did record a version of the one you're going to see tonight and almost finished editing it. But of course, I didn't want to upload it until I had the other one done. And that was the one that I kept changing my mind on and rethinking. And when I was about ready to do it, I didn't have the time to do it and had to wait a couple weeks, and weeks turned into more weeks. And suffice to say, the CDs for the other video, the second one that I'll be doing next weekend, have been sitting in wooden racks like this one here for literally months. And I have a bit of an OCD side in that I like to have things in their place. So it's been bugging me that for these months, because I've been bound and determined to get these videos done in one way or another. And that's one reason why I'm glad to be doing the live stream thing is I can get these done, put them, do them live, and they're done and out of there. So I can get these CDs back on their darn shelves where they belong. And that, believe it or not, that is going to be like a huge weight off my shoulders. I don't know if that really qualifies as clinically as OCD or not, but well, that's me. That's a look inside my warped little brain. But anyway, so yeah, this video and the next one I enjoyed doing my favorite albums of the 2010s list enough that I decided I wanted to give the same treatment but scale down a bit for the decade of the 2000s. So that's what these two videos are. Tonight I will be giving you three smaller lists, my favorite holiday albums, soundtracks, and compilations of the 2000s. 10 items in each of those lists plus one honorable mention each. And then in next week's list will be the big one, my 50 favorite studio albums of the 2000s. I've got a little sticky note because I know I'm going to catch myself saying the 2010s, so I've got a little note that says the 2000s on my screen so that I try to keep myself from flubbing that. But anyway, where am I going with this here? Yeah, I wanted to, you'll remember in my 2000s video or 2010s video, I'm doing it the opposite way. In my 2010s video, I did or 2010s spectacular-ish, it was a whole week-long thing. I did a separate video where I talked about my thoughts of the decade, the 2010s. But here I just thought I would run through the decade really quick in just a quick little intro and then do these three lists in the same video. And yes, it's just going to be this video and another one. I thought about doing my 100 favorite albums of the 2000s, which I easily could have done, but I decided, that's a decade in the past. Doing my 100 favorite albums of the 2010s, since that decade had just finished, was a bigger thing. So, try and restrain myself and limit it to 50. But anyway, quick thoughts on the decade of the 2000s. During that decade, my relationship with music didn't change much, certainly not as much as it did over the 2010s. I was listening to pretty much the same genres in December of 2009 that I was in January of 2000. And also, I owned the same home stereo system through that entire decade. I bought it in 1998, and although it started misbehaving before the end of the decade, I didn't replace it until the following decade was more than half over. So yeah, that I like to get every last penny out of things that I buy usually. So that tells you that. Since the add-on turntable I had with that stereo was a cheap one, my relationship with vinyl was pretty much dormant throughout the 2000s, and the compact disc was the only format on which I purchased music. I was done, or so I thought, with cassettes, and yeah, vinyl was kind of dormant, as I said, because I just had that kind of junky turntable. My stereo at the time had a 50 disc carousel changer. It was one of those where you put the discs upright and it would rotate the carousel. You could dial up your CD, and play it. And of course, you could program several CDs to play in whatever order you want, in a random order or whatever. It was a cool little stereo. And my on-the-go listening at the start of the decade was a CD Walkman. I did hop on the mini disc bandwagon for a few years, but by 2006 I had my first in a series of well-loved iPods, and I plan to do a video about my history of listening because I've reached a bit of a milestone or turning point, and so hopefully after this 2000s spectacular-ish, because it's a much more ish than my 2010s. After that's over, maybe I'll do that topic in a live stream. Now, one thing that came to an end in the 2000s was the era of the chain music stores. The one that I still miss most is Tower Records, which closed all their US stores in 2006. There was one in Portland that I'd go to every chance I could. I visited it, 5, 6 times since we had moved up here before it actually closed. And I also fondly remember the San Diego store that I went to a few times, and a couple in the LA area from my childhood. Virgin Megastore was another big music chain that shut down closer to the end of the decade. The one at the Ontario Mills in Southern California was lots of fun to go to, and when I was on vacation visiting my sister, that's when I got to go to that store. And if there was a silver lining to most of the chain stores closing down, it was that it finally got me to fully embrace the beauty of independent music stores. Though unfortunately some of them, nearly half the ones in the Eugene area in fact, didn't survive that decade either. It was a more brutal decade for the number of local store closures than the 2010s, but most of those stores I wasn't nearly as attached to as I was to Skips. The Record Garden was a retailer that had 2 stores in the area. One closed in 2003 and the other in 2007. And there was also a store called the Cat's Meow Jazz and Blues, closed in 2005. I went there a few times, but I wasn't nearly the jazz listener that I am now. The closure that hurt me the most, though, was a store called Face the Music, and that was which also shut down in 2005. It was located just off the University of Oregon campus, and I went there during my lunch break nearly every work day because I worked right there in the area. I did experiment a bit with my listening to start out the decade. That's when I became curious about music from other countries: Australia, Canada, the UK, and Western Europe. Music that was not popular in the US. I remember ordering 2 big lots of CD singles from the UK and Europe off of eBay, something like 50 or 75 singles in each of those lots. Most of those artists didn't stick, but I listened to every single one of them. And a few of them, though, I did become fond of, and they are in different forms in my music collection to this day. This foreign artist phase of mine got to the point that, on my last several visits to Tower Records, the first section I'd stop at would be the import CD clearance bin, where I discovered and impulse bought a handful of artists and albums that I still count among my favorites, a few of which you'll see in these next 2 lists. Excuse me 1 second here. Gotta hydrate every few minutes. Now, at that point, I was still totally resistant to country and mostly resistant to hip hop for that whole decade. And excuse me. And as I mentioned, I hadn't really listened to much jazz yet. Some artists that held steady in my regular rotation through that entire decade were Weird Al Yankovic, of course, Colin Hay, Espen Lind, Rufus Wainwright, Hanson, and Train. And artists I discovered during the first half of that decade and would hold my interest into the 2010s included Randall Bramblett, McFly, Teddy Thompson, Jamie Cullum, Paolo Nutini, and The Feeling. Many big artists passed away during the 2000s, most notably Ray Charles, Johnny Cash, Ruth Brown, a great soul and R&B singer, George Harrison, Barry White, Robert Palmer, John Phillips, and Denny Doherty of the Mamas and the Papas, guitar pioneer Les Paul, and Moog synth inventor Robert Moog. Yeah, lots of people passed away in the decade of the 2000s. But as with many music fans, the gut punch of the decade came at the end of the decade with the loss of Michael Jackson. I wasn't the hugest fan of his, but I liked his music and I still do. I grew up in the 80s and he was one of the handful of artists who defined that decade. I mean, you could not escape his music if you grew up in the 80s. The other reason his death was so memorable to me was because it happened while my sister was visiting us from out of state. And I remember the two of us just sitting and silently watching the CNN coverage of his death for at least a few hours that day. It's just kind of burned into my memory, you know. And to finish my thoughts on a more positive note, though, some of my fondest music-related personal memories of that entire decade would have to include the concerts that my sister and I attended, including Chicago, the Five Browns, and the most memorable for me, the joint tour of John Mayer and Sheryl Crow in 2006. So yes, lots and lots of memories from that decade. And I'm going to dial up the wrong file. Dial up the boilerplate stuff here for my every thing that I talk about with every list, and that is my favorites lists introduction, I guess you'd say. As with all other favorites lists on my channel, this one is not meant to be objective, definitive, or all-encompassing in any way. I didn't have the time or inclination to listen to everything that was released. I did listen to some notable albums that just didn't click with me for whatever reason, and I'm sure I missed some albums I probably would have loved. Also, the rankings of these albums are not meant to reflect any critical criteria like lyrical profundity, instrumental finesse, innovative production, or even cultural impact. They are quite simply the albums released between January 2000 and December 2009 that I personally connected with and enjoyed the most. That's why I call this list my favorite albums and not the best albums. Where's the picture? Oh. And bear in mind that the further away from number one an album is ranked, the less exact its ranking is meant to be taken. After all, favorites lists are an art and not a science, and are subject to change at any given time without notice, and depend greatly on the mood of their makers at the time they're made. So you can disagree with this list, but you can't call it wrong. And a couple of extra notes for these lists in particular. A title is eligible for these lists of the decade of the 2000s only if it was not released with the same track list before the year 2000, and if it consists of no more than 2 discs. Multi-disc titles are just unfair competition, so I decided to just leave them out of the running. And so let's go ahead and get started with my holiday list, which one extra note on my holiday list, this list includes not only individual artist releases, but also compilations by various artists. Actually, I think, or are there compilations? Actually, I don't think there is a compilation in this year's holiday list. So let me get started with my top 10 favorite holiday albums of the 2000s, starting with an honorable mention. We've got Boogie Woogie Christmas by the Brian Setzer Orchestra. Yes, I kind of love that throwback swing sound that the Brian Setzer Orchestra does. And it makes their holiday albums, they've done I think 3 holiday albums, it makes them just party albums. If you're hosting a Christmas party, put some Brian Setzer Orchestra on. I'm having trouble saying his name, Brian Setzer Orchestra. So yes, a lot of great songs on here. Boogie Woogie Santa Claus is, I believe that's an original of theirs. And let's see, Blue Christmas, which you would kind of assume that they would do. It's a bit of a rockabilly type of swing thing. And Everybody's Waiting for the Man with the Bag. That's another great upbeat song. Santa Claus is Back in Town. So yes, a lot of great selections on this one. Excuse me, got something in my eye. Yes, I really do have something in my eye. I'm not tearing up because of this CD, trust me. And on into the, before we do that though, on into the list proper for my 10 favorite holiday albums of the 2000s. First one is Christmas Time Is Here by Eric Kunzel and the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra. This is probably my second favorite Pops Orchestra, aside from, of course, the Boston Pops Orchestra under the baton of John Williams. He's like the god of movie music, okay? But yes, lots of great holiday favorites here. Christmas Time Is Here from A Charlie Brown Christmas. That's just a classic. It's a modern day classic. Well, let's face it. Silent Night, Little Drummer Boy, the Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire. And a lot of these songs feature the Indiana University Singing Hoosiers. So if you happen to be an Indiana University alum, you've got something to be proud about with the CD. Why am I having trouble speaking tonight? I don't know. That's a hint at how many flubs that I did with when I was recording my videos. It's here I just get to deal with them. You guys get to laugh at me when I say words wrong. Everybody wins, right? Anyway, I'll Be Home for Christmas. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. You get the picture. Just some great classic songs. I believe nearly all of them have vocals in it. A few of them are instrumental, so they just let the orchestra shine. It's wonderful stuff. And both the Cincinnati Orchestra and the Boston Pops Orchestra released 2 or 3 holiday albums each. I've only got one from each of those orchestras right now, so I'm looking forward to expanding my collection of theirs. Number 9 in my favorite holiday albums list is December by Chris Botti. He is a trumpeter, a jazz trumpeter. Lots of great songs on here. The Christmas song, The First Noel, Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow. He does a rendition of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. See, I'm on the ball. And then Winter Wonderland. The Hallelujah is a bit of an interesting choice, an unconventional choice for a holiday album. He also does a song called Perfect Day, which was written or co-written by Richard Marx. So a couple of, odd, not necessarily odd, but unexpected choices on a holiday album, and that's something that I always like and appreciate, rather than the standard fare. As much as I like the standard fare, they shake it up a little, and yay to Chris Botti for doing that. Hark the Herald Angels Sing, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Lots of good stuff on here. And he has a lot of some great finesse with the trumpet. I believe that CD was actually in my sister's collection, and I actually became aware of Chris Botti from my sister's collection. So not a huge fan of his, but I appreciate his work when I hear it. Number 8, we're still in the jazz realm, but we're talking vocal jazz this time. Harry for the Holidays by Harry Connick Jr. And as I mentioned before, Harry Connick Jr. albums can be hit or miss with me, but I'm beginning to like him a little bit more. I've noticed in the last year or so, I've gotten a handful more of his CDs, and so yeah, he's just got a great. He was born and raised in New Orleans, so he's got that bit of a Dixieland jazz kind of thing. I believe New Orleans qualifies as Dixieland jazz, doesn't it? Anyway, Frosty the Snowman, Blue Christmas. He again does a rendition of Blue Christmas, which kind of fits with him. He's got a bit more of a funky, upbeat style. A few originals on here, The Happy Elf and I Come With Love, as well as Oh Little Town of Bethlehem and Silent Night and Santa Claus Is Coming to Town. Good stuff on here, good selection of stuff. I guess I'm probably going to be repeating myself here in the holiday list, just because you'll find a lot of common songs on these CDs. So, and hey, the holidays wouldn't be the holidays without those songs, right? Number 7, Los Lonely Boys with their album Christmas Spirit. And I actually did not even know this one existed until I was at an the FYE up in Salem, Oregon, 2 or 3 years ago, and saw this one. I think it was actually, I actually got it for $1, and it was brand new and sealed. So I decided, I kind of like the Los Lonely Boys, not the Los Lonely Boys. Los means the, so it would be redundant. The Lonely Boys. I kind of like Los Lonely Boys. I've got their first 2 albums, good stuff, and my sister appreciated them as well. But yes, and these guys have, of course, being a Latin rock band, they kind of give a Latin flair to a lot of this stuff. Feliz Navidad, of course, is going to be on this album. There would be something wrong if it weren't, let's face it. And Run Run Rudolph, another fun upbeat song that they do very, very well. And they also do some of the more subdued, quiet songs, Away in a Manger, Silent Night, Carol of the Bells. So Carol of the Bells is actually a pretty interesting rendition that they do here on this one. Number 6, we've got David Archuleta with Christmas from the Heart. And his as much as I like music, the season of American Idol with David Archuleta and David Cook was the first one that I watched faithfully from beginning to end. And it's just as soon as I first saw David Archuleta, there's just something I liked about him. He's just kind of that aw shucks kid. It just seemed very, very sincere, very genuine. And so I couldn't help but kind of get to like his music. He's just kind of an endearing, you know. And then of course, but actually, when this holiday album came out, I actually did not pick it up until just a couple of years ago. So I went several years without having this album, and it's wonderful. And his voice is just shines like it always has on his albums through here. All the great classic hymns and Christmas carols that you would expect. Joy to the World, Angels We Have Heard on High, Oh Come All Ye Faithful, Oh Holy Night, which is actually one of my favorite Christmas carols. I've always enjoyed that one. And What Child Is This? Ave Maria, which is, you don't find that on a lot of Christmas albums, but yeah, very, very good Christmas album, I've got to say. It's obviously it is because it's number 6 in my list. And then we have the number 5 slot coming in on the top half of this list. We have A Brad Paisley Christmas. Yes, Brad Paisley is another artist that I've come to enjoy quite a bit over the last few years. Came into liking him because of my sister. And yes, he puts his trademark sense of humor in some of these songs. Santa Looked a Lot Like Daddy is on here. And a couple of what I believe are original songs. Penguin, James Penguin. I guess that's a fun one. And 364 Days to Go. So yes, Brad Paisley is, if you like Brad Paisley or if you've listened to him, you know he's just got that kind of an endearing and fun-loving and likable personality in his album. So yeah, lots of fun to be had on Brad Paisley Christmas. My number 4 favorite holiday album of the 2000s is Cool Yule by Bette Midler. Talk about somebody that's got charm and personality out the back end. She's just wonderful. I love her stuff. And as you've known in my playlist and haul videos, I've really been collecting Bette Midler's stuff at quite a pretty decent clip lately. And this is just every bit as enjoyable as her regular non-Christmas studio albums. The title track is excellent, and she actually does a medley of Winter Wonderland and Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow with Johnny Mathis. How can I not love that one, right? I love Johnny Mathis. And then O Come Emmanuel, Mele Kalikimaka. She does a good job on that one. That's kind of in her wheelhouse, you know. And What Are You Doing New Year's Eve? So yeah, just 11 tracks, so probably one of the shorter albums on this list, but still lots and lots of fun. And now, as I get into the top 3, yes, top 3. Coming in at number 3, you kind of expected this one to, well, I don't know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. If you didn't know it existed, you probably wouldn't. But this is another one that I have come to enjoy thanks to my sister. Christmas Songs, by Diana Krall. One of my sister's favorite artists and a wonderful, fantastic jazz vocalist. And this one has all the it has all the staples on here. Jingle Bells, Let It Snow, The Christmas Song, Winter Wonderland, I'll Be Home for Christmas, and the list goes on. It's just a fantastic assortment of Christmas songs. Yeah, doing it this way, not this way, it's going to work. So yeah, if you like Diana Krall's voice, and you like holiday albums, this is not to be missed. It's fantastic. Wonderful. Now, my runner-up on this list is a very unusual pick. And again, it is one that was in my sister's collection, and I was not expecting anything special from this CD. I almost thought it was going to be a throwaway, but it ended up charming the heck out of me. And it's just, as I said, it's just a very unusual thing for a Christmas album. It is Songs of Joy and Peace by Yo-Yo Ma and Friends. So yes, it's a mostly classical, but he does go into the jazz, easy listening maybe, genres. But the list of guests on this album is just amazing. Diana Krall, as we just mentioned here. Dave Brubeck and Matt Brubeck are on several tracks. James Taylor is on one track here. Edgar Meyer and Chris Thiele, his compatriots from the Goat Rodeo Sessions albums. And who else on here? Natalie McMaster, Alison Krauss is on here. Joshua Redman, Chris Botti. That's like half the stuff on the rest of my list. They make appearances on here. And it's not just Christmas carols either. The songs are an interesting choice of songs as well. There's some classical pieces, and I think some original songs as well. But yeah, just a lot of. I actually can't comment on any of them because it has been a while. Well, it's October, so it's been a while since I've listened to any of these CDs. But yeah, just fantastic stuff. Happy Christmas War is Over with Jake Shimabukuro, another one of my favorite artists I keep an eye on, at least. That was, of course, the John Lennon song. And My Favorite Things is on here, the song. And Here Comes the Sun is the one that he does with James Taylor. So yeah, that's a Beatles song, isn't it? I think. Yeah. So an unusual choice for a holiday album, but yeah, it's just it just adds to the album's charm, as I was mentioning with a couple of other albums. And Joy to the World, of course, is a classic Christmas carol on here. So yeah, just lots of unusual, interesting choices with a lot of fantastic guest artists, an all-star list of guest artists on here as well. So yes, as I mentioned, I just kind of fell in love with this album when I listened to it. So one of the last great gifts from my sister. That's how I look at that album, really. And now down to my number one favorite holiday album of the 2000s. Oh, I'll read your comment in a second, Noah. And a lot of you probably expected this artist might show up at some point on the list. Excuse me. If you knew that they made this album. Bare Naked Ladies, Bare Naked for the Holidays. How could this not be my number one favorite album? Oh gosh, we're almost half an hour in. This could run over the 1 hour mark. It may be, I don't know. If it does, who cares, right? You'll watch it. I guess. Anyway, Bare Naked for the Holidays. I love Bare Naked Ladies from their first album, as you guys know. And they do a fun arrangement of, traditional carols, some fun stuff, and of course their fun-loving personalities. They inject their fun into a lot of these songs. And one of the most interesting things about this album that I really enjoy is they put 3 or 4 Hanukkah songs in here. Why not put Hanukkah songs on a holidays album? It's not a Christmas album, it's a holiday album. So yes, Hanukkah Blessings, as well as Hanukkah O Hanukkah. And I believe, is the dreidel song on here or not? Maybe it's not. I thought it was. But yeah, just the fact that they put some Hanukkah songs in here as well, that just notches it up a couple of rungs on the ladder. Well, obviously, because that's number one, in my opinion. So yeah, my favorite holiday album of the 2000s is Bare Naked for the Holidays by Bare Naked Ladies. Pardon the weird noises. It's just I got the rack sitting right here. So, okay, a break really quick so I need to catch up on the comments. Oh, yeah, I know. I've never been into Christmas music, or at least I didn't think I was. And yes, you see here I've made Christmas albums or Christmas lists for 2 decades. Go figure, right? Okay. The next list is my top 10, plus 1 honorable mention, favorite soundtrack albums of the 2000s. Oh, and I've got a note on this one as well. There we go. As when it comes to the soundtracks, both song compilation soundtracks as well as instrumental and orchestral scores are eligible for this list. I decided my list, my rules, right? The movie or TV show to which the soundtrack belongs didn't necessarily have to have been released in the 2000s, but the title must not have been previously released commercially in that format. So, and I don't just mean CD versus LP, I mean with that same exact track listing. So that's the rules in my soundtrack albums list. So let's go ahead and get started with the honorable mention, and that is the soundtrack from the original Tron by Wendy Carlos. And the reason this is the honorable mention, it's a bit of a technicality. It is the exact same track list, but with 3 additional songs on it. Although this actually was never released on CD until what did it come out in 2001. So yes, it was electronic music. So it's like CD is arguably the format it was made for, and nobody ever saw fit to release it on CD until 2001. So uh, I grew up with this movie, was a favorite of mine from my childhood, and sometimes I can just listen to, and this goes with maybe 1 or 2 more of the CDs in this list here. I can just play it in my head almost front to back. This just was just so ingrained in my psyche as a kid. And as I said, if it hadn't been for that, what I force upon it as a technicality, it would have been much, much higher up on the list. So, but yes, thank you to the powers that be at Disney for finally releasing it on CD. I had to wait a long time for it, but it finally came out. Now, number 10. Here is a TV/film property that you were bound to see in this list. Now that I've said that, you know what's coming. Star Trek. This is the Best of Star Trek Volume 2. Now, this is at the end of the run of GNP Crescendo Records, which was an independent label that was kind of, they kind of had the market cornered on releasing Star Trek soundtracks for, a decade and a half, roughly. And at the year 2000 was, as I said, kind of toward the end of their run of their license, I guess, for releasing Star Trek. This was the second CD that they put out that had music from all 4 at the time Star Trek television series, the original series Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, with music that had not been released on any other album previously. That makes the title "The Best of Star Trek" kind of misleading, but this was the only one that they put out. Actually, the only Star Trek television soundtrack album put out during the decade of the 2000s. So that's kind of why I had to put it on this list. I had to shoehorn it in there somewhere, didn't I? But yes, lots of good stuff on here. If you're not a Star Trek fan, you wouldn't really get the context in it, so I won't go into the details. But yes, I've got quite a collection, which I'm planning on showing off at some point. Eventually, my collection of Star Trek music. I have a pretty extensive collection. But yeah, that's just not one of my favorite Star Trek soundtracks of my collection, but still, I can't live without it in my collection. Number 9 on my list is a song-based soundtrack. It's also from a television series. Hey, Ben, how's it going? So, sorry you can't stick around. Glad to see you. Hope you're doing well. Glad to see you. I'm glad to see your name in the text. Anyway, and your screen name at that. It's just one of those awkward moments where I'm kind of making a fool of myself. Even though you guys probably don't think so anyway. Back to the list before this video ends up being 3.5 hours long. Number 9 is also a television series soundtrack, but it is a song-based soundtrack. It is the first volume of the soundtrack from the TV series Smallville, which, of course, as you guys know, or maybe you don't, told the story of Clark Kent's boyhood before he became Superman, or teenage years, I guess, not boyhood. But yes, a lot of great songs on here. The title song from the series, Save Me by Remy Zero. And they have songs by Weezer, Five for Fighting, Ryan Adams, The Flaming Lips, Sixpence None the Richer, and Lifehouse in here as well. Most of them are songs that appear on their albums, on the individual artists' albums. They're not exclusive to the soundtrack, but still, it's a great souvenir of sorts to have from this the series. I enjoyed the series for most of its run. It kind of ran out of gas and went off of its rails toward the end of the show, but it was still fun. Number 8 is going to have a familiar ring to it. Star Trek. Yes, this is the score from the reboot movie back in, 2009? Score by Michael Giacchino. And this is on the list because I really, really enjoyed the movie. Not my favorite Star Trek movie, but I think they did a pretty good job with the reboot universe, the reboot trilogy. And also, it kind of loses some points because ever since, like the early 2000s, mid-2000s maybe, the fact that movies have been so much faster paced doesn't give room for the really good thematic suites that are in a lot of classic soundtracks. So, but still, some great motifs and melodies and cuts on this album. great stuff. What can I say? And I love the way that they Michael Giacchino incorporated the original Star Trek theme into his Star Trek theme that he created for these movies. That was done in the end credits track. So yeah, good stuff. Good stuff, gotta say. And it's also an opportunity for me to put more Star Trek in the list. Number 7 is another television-based property and another song-based soundtrack. This is Peppers and Eggs, the second volume of The Sopranos. Very weird that this is on my list because I have never seen a full... Actually, I might have seen one full episode of The Sopranos, but I'm kind of intrigued to check it out because the acting was phenomenal on that show, and the writing, from what I've seen of it, was pretty darn good too. And my brother was a huge fan of The Sopranos, but I've never quite gotten into it. We do have, we got it from my brother for his birthday, the complete series on Blu-ray. So one of these days I'm going to break it open and start binge watching it. But the soundtrack is, that's what we're talking about, is a soundtrack. Such a diverse mix of stuff on here. Classic rock, blues, a little bit of jazz and stuff, and indie rock even. So yes, you've got Elvis Costello, the Kinks, the Police, and Henry Mancini. They do a medley of Every Breath You Take and the theme from Peter Gunn, which is very, very interesting. That actually leads off this soundtrack. It's a, I think I mentioned it's a 2-disc set, this one here. But yes, Otis Redding, Casey Chambers, the Rolling Stones, Frank Sinatra, Cake. I mean, as you can see, Van Morrison, the Pretenders. This thing just pretty much runs the gamut of genres and eras and decades and stuff. So it's a very, very interesting listen. Yes, and that was one of the things that kind of stood out with The Sopranos, aside from the acting, was the music that they picked for the show. It's just excellent, excellent stuff. And that is a fantastic 2-disc set. The first volume, which is just a 1-disc set, is equally as good. So yeah, one more reason that I'm kind of interested in checking out the series. Now, number 6 on my favorite soundtrack releases of the 2000s is the original Sam Raimi version of Spider-Man. The soundtrack is by Danny Elfman, one of the great film composers, and of course he was the frontman from Oingo Boingo, the rock group from the 80s. But yes, I was mentioning a few minutes ago about, with a Star Trek soundtrack, about how faster-paced movies now don't give the opportunity for themes and suites. This is actually one of the, probably one of the last movies out there that had an actual opening title sequence with credits and all. And that was one of my favorite selections, is the main title from this. And there's also the costume montage that, that spends a few minutes where Peter's developing the idea for the costume, that does that. And there's a sweet music in there too. And also, just lots of great music on here. And that's one of the reasons I love the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies as much as I do, is because of the music. And actually, I think the third movie was not scored by Danny Elfman. It was scored by somebody else, I think. But yes, the first 2 movies, fantastic. First-rate scores. Excellent, excellent stuff. Gosh, getting a dry throat here. 11:30 is early for you, Ben? Well, I am way sound asleep at 11:30, trust me. Anyway, on to number 5. We're in the top 5 of this list here. Number 5 is by my man, John Williams. I had to put a John Williams score in here somewhere, right? Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Yes, the first Harry Potter film, obviously. And this was, in my opinion, this was one of John Williams' last great, truly great scores. Not that he doesn't do great work all the time. It's just that this was one of those last scores, itchy nose, sorry. One of the last scores that he did that had some great, great themes and motifs. I mean, he's incorporated a lot of this stuff into his concert performances and concerts that aren't conducted by him, that are just done by somebody else. A lot of the themes in here have become concert staples, like Hedwig's theme and Harry's Wondrous World. That's a great, great suite. And just, yes, so much of this stuff is just, and it's just such good music. And I love the first Harry Potter movie, mostly because of the score. I would have thought that I would have loved the Harry Potter movies for their subject matter and their theme, the fantasy worlds. But You know, just the music is just absolutely outstanding in that movie, as I'm sure you guys know. Now, number 4 is another song-based soundtrack. Is this the last one? No, this is not the last song-based soundtrack. Spoiler alert. But this one is probably not known to a lot of you guys. Together. Now, this was an MTV original TV movie that was a spoof of the boy band phenomenon back in the 2000s. This was released in the year 2000, I believe. Yeah. And so, yes, being a satire and parody of the boy band phenomenon, the songs are very, very much tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, it's just, Say It, Don't Spray It is one of them. And although one of them that kind of was really cool, a very clever idea and actually really well done song is You Plus Me Equals Us, Calculus. That's a good song. But yeah, Say It, Don't Spray It. And there was another one. I thought that was another one that was really, really funny. But I mean, all the songs have funny lyrics to varying degrees. But yeah, Say It, Don't Spray It. It's a classic in my head anyway. So yes, good stuff. And the funny thing about Together was it, in a way, it kind of became what it was parodying, because the actors almost became better known for their roles in here as being members of an actual boy band, kind of like the Monkees, than for their real identities. So that made it kind of fun. They actually did a TV series that lasted for a season and a half, and they put out a sequel album, an album with songs from the series later on, a couple of years later. So both albums are just lots of fun, really entertaining. Now, number 3 on my list is one of those that kind of is a classic property, but the soundtrack release I'm showing here was not released in this form until the 2000s, 2009 actually. Oh, this is more recent than I thought. It is, and it's yet another revisiting of that franchise, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. This is the score from probably the best of the original Star Trek films by one of my favorite composers of the 80s, James Horner. May he rest in peace. He's been gone for quite a while now. Passed away in a plane crash a few years ago. Sad, sad stuff. But yes, fantastic stuff. I can't praise the movie or the score enough. It's just wonderful stuff. If you have not seen Star Trek II, I would recommend seeing that as one of the first movies. It springboards from an episode of the TV series, but you don't really need to know. You don't really need to have seen it, because the movie is just enthralling enough on its own. But anyway, the score, as I said, is just fantastic. And yes, about half. This was put out on an album back in the day when the movie was released, but this CD is a greatly expanded edition. It's got, I think it's at least twice the length of the original score album. So there you go. And that's the reason that it's on this list. It's eligible for this list. Just wonderful, fantastic music. I was very happy to have a lot of the cues that were favorites of mine that were not on the original soundtrack album. Now, number 2, my runner-up is another CD that I got from my sister and just fell in love with from my sister's collection. I inherited it from her. Excuse me here. I'm all choked up. Anyway, this is another TV show based thing. Actually, it's kind of TV show and movie based at the same time. It is The Muppet Show. Yes, the 25th anniversary collection, Music, Mayhem, and More. In my opinion, kind of like you're never too old, in my opinion, for the Looney Tunes cartoons. You're never too old for the Muppets, in my opinion. I have not seen any of the recent Muppet films, but I have seen, I think, all 3. Were there only 3 of the classic Muppet movies, and saw various episodes of The Muppet Show. All the classics that are known from the show are on here, as well as the movies. Mana, it's actually a remake. Mana was done by another artist before it became famous from the Muppet Show rendition. And they have Being Green and The Rainbow Connection from, I believe those were from the original Muppet movie. So yes, pretty much any Muppet-related song from the 80s backward, you'll find on this album. Moving Right Along, which was, I think, I can't remember what movie it was from. My brain's fuzzy right now. But anyway, suffice it to say, a fun, wonderful, enjoyable album. I I kind of expected I was going to enjoy this, and I was right. And it's one of the fondest keepsakes from my sister's collection, and one of the fondest memories of my sister that I could possibly have. Thank you so much, Kimmy, for leaving me with that, as well as with spoiler alert, my number one compilation coming up here. It's also one of my sister's keepsakes. Now, my number one favorite album of the 2000s is, and it's another one kind of like Star Trek 2. It is a classic film from the 80s, but soundtrack was never released. Actually, the score was actually never released until 2008. Yes, 2008. One of my favorite movies of the 80s, Back to the Future, the score by Alan Silvestri. The only official release that we got of Back to the Future back in the day was the song-based soundtrack, which had just two very heavily edited cuts of the orchestral score pieces from Alan Silvestri. But this is all out, front to back, his instrumental orchestral score from the movie. I love the film, and I could tell you a story about the film. Maybe I'll do that at some point. Maybe on my Trekkies channel, I'll do that. But yeah, suffice to say, I absolutely love this album. Well, it's number one on my list. And the fun thing about this album, though, is it's a 2-disc set. Disc 1 is the score from the movie as it was released. Disc 2 was an earlier version, alternate early sessions from a version of the movie that was filming was underway for it, with Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly and not Michael J. Fox. Some of you might not be aware that Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty McFly, and they had filmed several scenes, I think a few weeks worth of filming, before they realized that Eric Stoltz just wasn't giving them the mood and stuff that they were looking for. And so they went back to their first choice, Michael J. Fox, who was having difficulty being let loose from family ties long enough to film a movie. Fun little backstory on that. But yeah, the early sessions on disc 2 are give a bit of a darker feel to the movie than the more lighthearted sci-fi action adventure thing that the movie as it was released was done. So not only do I have the original score that I had been wanting for years and years and years, but an interesting score from a film that never was, which kind of makes it really, really cool. A bit of an extra icing on the cake for that. So, good. And then there's that weird noise again. So, pause for reading the comments here, Noah's comments. You really like the idea of soundtracks, but you rarely find that any catch your attention. I can understand that. It's not always, and I'm not sure what made movie soundtracks catch my attention, but for some reason I just kind of glommed on to that orchestral music in the background, and have loved them ever since. Yeah, you would never want to listen to them outside of the movie. Yeah, again, totally understandable. And yeah, you like the song-based soundtracks more. Totally get that. So, wow, we've only got 10 minutes left in this hour, so this video is probably going to go over the hour a little bit, which I was kind of expecting. So let's go ahead and get started on my... That's one thing about you guys can stop in the middle of this and come back and watch it later. You don't have to sit through the entire hour and 10-15 minutes that this video is going to end up being. Isn't the internet wonderful? Anyway, on to my list of my favorite compilation releases of the 2000s. And again, let me check my notes, make sure I'm not... Yes. Oh, yes. For compilations as with the soundtracks, or actually, no, this would be something different. Sorry. My brain, it's almost bedtime for me, so my brain's starting to give way here. With regard to the compilations I have on this list, I include for consideration both various artists' collections as well as greatest hits packages by a specific artist. Yes, I can speak. So, on with my favorite compilation releases of the 2000s. The honorable mention is one of those single artist releases. That is Amy Grant, greatest hits from 1986 to 2004. And this covers her secular output. As some of you probably know, she is probably better known, or at least for a longer part of her career, as a Christian artist. But yes, this collects the secular songs that she was most famous for that were huge, huge hits. The peak of her secular recording career was in the early 90s. Some two fantastic albums that she put out. But little would I realize that this album would become kind of special to me later on. It's got a few unreleased songs or songs that were never on albums, newly recorded for this collection. One of which features Keb Mo, who I wouldn't become fond of until years later. So I was kind of meant to have this CD, I guess you'd say. So yes, and lots of great stuff and a couple of remixes as well. So yeah, I've got most of what's on this album, but there's enough non-album stuff or newly recorded stuff that I decided to keep it. And it's one of those CDs that I remember when and where I bought it. It's kind of funny how some of the things you just kind of randomly stick in your head. That's another thing I could do a video on at some point, isn't it? And then number 10 on my list, starting off with the list proper, we have Billy Crystal Presents the Milt Gabler Story. Now, Billy Crystal, the actor and comedian, is the nephew of Milt Gabler, who started out as a record store owner in New York and became a record producer, and a very prominent early record producer in the fields of jazz and blues recordings from the 40s, 50s, 60s. The list of things on here, they're all singles that Milt Gabler produced. Let's see, Billie Holiday is on here several times. The Andrews Sisters, Louis Jordan, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Peggy Lee, the Mills Brothers, Pearl Bailey. I mean, the list goes on and on. It is an all-star list. And Billy Crystal did a stand-up show. It was like a 2-hour-long stand-up show, which I bought on DVD recently because I loved the way he told the story so much. He actually told a good third of this concert. It's called 700 Sundays, if you want to look for it. And through a good third of this thing was he told the story of how his uncle started out in the record business, started out as a record store owner, and eventually became to producing all of these songs. And Billy Crystal would hang out with his dad, with his dad's brother, who was Milt Gabler, and in the company of all these great musicians. And so Billy Crystal had an amazing childhood, surrounded by Billie Holiday and Pearl Bailey, and just it'll make you jealous just listening to his retelling of that. So yes, look for Billy Crystal's stand-up show, 700 Sundays. It is fantastic, heartwarming, heartbreaking in some places. Wonderful, wonderful thing. It's Billy Crystal is amazing, an amazing storyteller. So, but yes, and that compilation, as you can tell by the track listing, is unbelievable. Number 9 on my list is something that probably a lot of you guys, unless any of you are watching from the UK, this is probably totally new to you. The Saturday Sessions, the Dermot O'Leary Show. Dermot O'Leary is a radio host in the UK on BBC Radio. And I guess he would have a segment in his radio show where he would have musical guests on that would perform songs live right there in the studio. And this is a collection of those recordings. And there are a lot of contemporary bands of the time. This was put out in 2007, I believe. And, so contemporary artists covering other artists' songs. And there are, some songs that are performed by their original artists. Mika performs Grace Kelly, for example. But then we have The Feeling performing Walk Like an Egyptian, the Mangle song. And, what's the other one that's in here? Yes, Rufus Wainwright performs Hallelujah, the Leonard Cohen song. Wonderful rendition of that. Ben Queller performs his original song, In Other Words. And what do we have? Orson, which is a rock band from the UK, performs the Hall & Oates song, I Can't Go For That. Great rendition of that. And Amy Winehouse performs To Know Him Is To Love Him. So, yes, 2 discs, 44 songs on here. So this set is just packed with great, great songs. And they are original recordings. So it's not the plain old studio recordings that are on the original album. So wonderful set of stuff. And he put out 3 or 4 volumes, Dermot O'Leary did, of these recordings. But the first volume is the only one that I felt compelled to pick up. It's just because it got a lot of favorite bands of mine doing great songs. So now number 8 on my list of favorite compilations is another single artist set, and that is Just the Right Sound, the Association Anthology. Now, the Association was a folk rock band from the 60s, kind of like, what am I thinking? The Byrds, more or less like the Byrds. And I have a special attachment to this because one of the frontmen of the association, Terry Kirkman, went to school with and lived a few houses away from my mother when she was growing up. So, yes, they went to school together. My mother went to a class reunion, and so I sent the booklet from this. This actually originally came housed in one of the chubby 2-disc CD cases, but I actually compacted it into a single width. So I've got the booklet somewhere else because it doesn't fit in here. But I sent the booklet with her, and he personally autographed it to me. So that's a cool thing, a great, and actually one of their original albums, which was in my mother's collection, he had personally signed that album, and I've got that record in my collection too. So I have 2 autographs by Terry Kirkman of the Association in my collection. So that is one reason that this CD will never ever leave my possession. It's just a great stuff. Along Comes Mary and Windy were 2 of their biggest hits. If you've probably heard those at some point somewhere, but yeah, just a very good band. Yeah, if you like 60s music, give them a try. Number 7 on my list is Retrospective by Herman's Hermits. I've got a soft spot for Herman's Hermits. What can I say? They're kind of like the Monkees, but Herman's Hermits are a real band. They weren't a manufactured band. And so, yes, they were on the more fun, the more poppy side of the British Invasion stuff, not as serious as the Beatles or the Stones. And they had some great fun songs here. I'm Into Something Good was probably their biggest hit, and that is just such a bouncy, catchy song. One of my favorite songs from the 60s. And let's see, Can't You Hear My Heartbeat is another great one. Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, another great song. Although that one might be a little bit sexist nowadays. But one of my favorite songs on here is I'm Henry VIII, I Am. And it's got a great joke in the lyrics. So yeah, check out I'm Henry VIII, I Am. Listen to that if you want to hear a great Herman's Hermits song. But yeah, fun stuff. One of the great 60s albums in my collection. Number 6, we've got a bit of a string here of single artist compilations as opposed to various artist things. Fats Domino, Greatest Hits, Walk Into New Orleans. I've really come to, just in the last few years, really come to appreciate Fats Domino. Love his bluesy R&B stuff with just a little bit of New Orleans funk in there. He was born and raised in New Orleans. So, yeah, I mean, the list of songs that this guy did, I mean, let's see. And as if it's going to take me a second to read them. Ain't That a Shame? My Blue Heaven, Blueberry Hill, of course. Blue Monday, I'm Walking, and I Want to Walk You Home. And this has 30 songs on it, and most of them are probably songs you've heard before. So yes, a fantastic selection of songs. One of my favorite artists to come out of the 60s, I've got to say. He is kind of threatening to unseat another one that's coming up here in just a second from one of my, push them out of their ranking. And Fats Domino's threatening to jump up into their position. That's what I'm trying to say. Number 5, we're down to the top 5, and yes, we should only go over by about 10 or 15 minutes here. Thanks for bearing with me. I hope you've been enjoying this. I hope I haven't been rambling on too much, though it's making me dread how long my top 50 studio albums video is going to be next weekend, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Number 5 on my list is Midnight, Moonlight, and Magic, the very best of Henry Mancini. And this is another CD that is courtesy of my sister. And not only did Henry Mancini do a lot of great instrumental stuff, lots of fun stuff here, but one of the songs on this reminds me so much of my sister. It's called Baby Elephant Walk, and mainly because my sister, when she was a little kid, my mom said that my sister loved baby elephants. She wanted to have a baby elephant as a pet. That's how much she loved baby elephants. So this just kind of links me inseparably to my sister, this album. But of course, Henry Mancini did the Pink Panther theme. That's his most famous song. And Moon River. He did the great standard song Moon River, as well as the theme from Peter Gunn. So yes, Henry Mancini's done a lot of stuff, more stuff than you probably would remember him for. So yeah, great stuff, great instrumental stuff. 60s, not kitschy enough to be considered lounge stuff, but yeah, still very, very good. Now, number 4 on my list is the artist that I mentioned might possibly become unseated by Fats Domino in my ranking of my favorite artists from the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. The Everly Brothers, the Definitive Pop Collection. This is a two discs, but it's not jam-packed. It's got about 15 songs each on it. But come on, the Everly Brothers. If you like vocal harmony, the Everly Brothers, look no further than them. Bye Bye Love, Wake Up Little Susie, All I Have to Do Is Dream, and Kathy's Clown. Lucille, although that was actually a Little Richard original, but they covered it. And that's just a few songs on here. I mean, those are their most famous songs, but they just are just magical to listen to, honestly. I can't get over, I have a soft spot for good vocal harmony, and the Everly Brothers, being brothers, obviously, were just absolute natural masters at it. So, yeah, what more can be said about the Everly Brothers? You've probably heard them before. So, now number 3 is one of the more unusual ones in my collection. But those of you who know me will probably not be surprised that it's number 3 in my set. It is Dementia 2000, the 30th anniversary collection from the Dr. Demento show. Dr. Demento was a radio host that did, well, actually, he still does it on the web. He used to do a live radio show every week with his favorite novelty songs and very obscure musical treasures from all decades of music. And yes, this one has, of course, Weird Al Yankovic on here, but some of the other stalwarts of novelty song Hall of Fame, I guess you'd say, Tom Lehrer. Why am I not thinking of these names off the top of my head? I'm tired, I know that, but their names are just, I'm drawing blanks on them. Tom Lehrer, Spike Jones, thank you. Yeah. And Stan Freberg, I think, is on this one. If he's not on this one, he's on their other 2 collections, the other 2 Documento collections, which of course I have also. And then we have The Thing by Phil Harris. That is a great song that I did not discover until the Dr. Demento show, and it's one of my favorite novelty songs of all time. Love that song. It's just got a great hook. One of the most inventive hooks in all of music history is on The Thing by Phil Harris. Listen to that song. You're going to love it. But yes, this brings back, and all of Dr. Demento's collections bring back memories of me sitting down on Sunday nights in front of my old transistor radio listening to Dr. Demento. And later on, I would have a radio that had a tape recorder built into it, so I recorded my favorite songs when I heard they were coming up. So, yeah. Lots of great memories. I'm glad this video is almost over because my voice is starting to give out. Number 2, my runner-up for my favorite compilation CD of the 2000s is The Ultimate Collection by the Kinks. If you're a music fan and you don't like the Kinks, at least a little bit, there's something wrong with you, I think. Now, I actually prefer this one. I don't have any of their studio albums, actually, because looking through their discography on Wikipedia, they had so many non-album singles that I just felt it was more effective, more efficient to just have this Ultimate Collection. It's 2 discs, 44 songs on here. And, I mean, everything from their first, believe it was their first hit, You Really Got Me, all the way through their later stuff, like, what was that song in the 80s that they did? Again, Come Dancing. They did, and it was kind of a surprising, of course, I had first heard of them because of Come Dancing, so I assumed that they were an 80s band. Little did I know back then that was only their latest hit. Yeah, in my opinion, Come Dancing doesn't hold a candle to their 60s classics. Waterloo Sunset, I love Waterloo Sunset because of its prominent placement in a recent movie. Some of you out there will be able to guess the movie. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But yeah, dedicated follower of fashion. And what's that? All Day and All of the Night. Great song. So yeah, you could go through the entire list, honestly. Sunny Afternoon, another one. So Lola, another great song. I mean, the Kinks had basically an endless list almost of great, great songs and great sense of humor in a lot of their songs. So they were kind of the cheeky, the harmless, cheeky guys of the British invasion. The Beatles were the good boys that you wanted to take home to mom. The Rolling Stones were kind of the bad boys. The Kinks were the cheeky sense of humor guys, I guess you'd say. Yay for my wacky explanation. Anyway, now down to the final entry in the final list for today. My number one favorite compilation album of the 2000s. Some of you guys are probably going to, well, let me just get to it. It's one that I've told you guys about before if you've watched the right video in my back catalog. Mary Had a Little Amp. This is a collection of children's songs done by contemporary artists, contemporary being 2004 was when this album was released. And this one was another album that came from my sister's collection. And if any single album embodies my sister and her spirit or her essence, it's this one. She was a school teacher and she loved teaching, younger kids. And so children's songs was kind of up her alley. She loved buying children's books for her classroom. And so this is just, when I listened to this for the first time, digging it out of my sister's collection, I could literally feel her sitting beside me as I listened to it. That's how strongly this CD reminds me of my sister. I will die with this CD in my possession. It's got Maroon 5, REM, the Dixie Chicks, Madonna, Bonnie Raitt, Moby is on here, Lou Reed, a bit of an odd choice there, Indigo Girls, Roseanne Cash. The Dixie Chicks sing The Rainbow Connection. What more can you want, honestly? Let's see. Maroon 5 does Pure Imagination. That was from the Willy Wonka soundtrack, but I've come to really enjoy that song. And the album closes with, in a bit of a full circle kind of way, Graham Nash does a solo performance of Teach Your Children. So that's a Crosby, Stills, and Nash song. So yes, just a wonderful song. Excuse me. When You Wish Upon a Star is done by Joe Henry. And there are a couple of other, original songs on here that the artists did themselves, I believe. And let's see, The 3 R's is done by Jack Johnson. And so yes, just a wonderful, delightful album. Yeah, I would suggest if you're a kid at heart, and if this stuff kind of sounds like it's up your alley, trust me, it is. It's every bit as wonderful and good as it sounds. And as I said, it is just my explanation proves to you should be all you need to know as to why it is my number one favorite compilation album of the decade of the 2000s. That is probably the CD that I most treasure from my sister's entire collection. So I just absolutely love it. Yeah, it is a neat album, Noah. It is just lovely. I loved it. Anyway, so it is. Yeah, see, I kind of pegged it just about right. 10 minutes over my 1 hour mark. So, well, I guess I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. 1 second here. Sorry, I wasn't prepared. Shame on me. But yes, stay tuned next Friday for, assuming I still have a voice at that point, my top 50 favorite studio albums of the 2000s. I will finally be able to get that list taken care of and out to you guys. I want to deliver that baby, as it were, and so I can put those CDs back on the shelf. It's kind of silly and stupid that's one of my big motivators for doing this, but hey. Anyway, keep me from rambling on here anymore. That'll do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, hit that like button and share it with your friends. And give me your thoughts, questions, suggestions, or constructive criticisms in the comment section below. Also, scroll down to the description for the links to my Twitter and Instagram feeds, and links to my favorite fellow YouTubers who are all worth checking out. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and browse my past videos, and be sure to ring that notifications bell so you'll be the first to know each time I drop a new video. Hand gestures. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next weekend, and remember, life's too short to be a music snob. See you guys. Yes, close all tabs for PDF Reader. Bye.